Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Aquí
Hello, good
continuamos con
afternoon.
nuestro programa
Here we
de la
continue
primera
with our
Passivhaus de las
program, the
Américas.
first Passivhaus of the Americas
Damos la
conference.
palabra a Juan Manuel,
I would like now to
agrónomo
give
de
the
la ciudad
floor
de
to
Buenos
Juan
Aires y
Manuel,
actual director ejecutivo del Instituto
agricultural
Tecnológico
engineer from
Latinoamericano
the University
Passivhaus,
of Buenos
quien nos va a
Aires
presentar
and
sobre
director
sus
of the
actividades antes de ir con
Latin American
el
Institute of
invitado del día.
Passivhaus.
Perfecto, José. Muchas gracias.
Thank you,
Voy
Jose.
a compartir la pantalla.
I'm going to share my screen now.
Bien, este panel es un panel muy importante para todos.
This is a very important panel for all of us. You've probably heard Edward Masria just now. We are seeking to achieve
Este esquema es simplemente para mostrar la
this
importancia
scheme. This is just to show you the importance
esto es algo que se está viendo hace
and how it affects us.
pocos años, pero queremos resaltar la importancia de
And we want to highlight the importance that these materials have.
Queremos resaltar también y dejar bien claro cómo
We also want to
es un poco el material
show how
que
cement is the
tenemos
material that we have to stop using
ya que es
or have to use less because it's the most destructive on earth. And it's the second one that we use in volume after water. And this is a very dangerous combination that we are using. And today we have a big palette of materials to have more options. Life formula is the photosynthesis formula. Solar light, water, and CO2. We not only generate construction materials, but we also obtain oxygen. We have to pay more attention to this. And from this formula, when they talk to me about materials technology, the image of the hand is Andrew Waugh. Is image. He's an English architect who did the first building fully made out of wood in the center of London. And Andrew has in his hand the necessary amount of seeds necessary to build these 29 apartments. These seeds, with only sunlight and water, in 15 years, we can build apartments like the ones you can see here. So I believe that wood is the most technological material that we have. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave the floor to Oliver. Oliver, please, if you can continue, and we can start. Thank you very much, Juan Manuel. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here today at this conference. Thank you very much for this invitation, and congratulations for ILAP for this initiative. It's very hopeful to see Passivhaus taking shape in this way in Latin America. I want to share a presentation about the application of renewable materials to Passivhaus projects. We've mentioned many statistics today at this conference, but it's worthwhile to repeat some things. The buildings generate, according to the World Green Building Council, about 39% of CO2 emissions globally. According to this same institution, they estimate that about 10% are embedded or initial emissions. They are emissions that derive from factory construction, the manufacturing of these materials for the construction process. We can add the fact that we spend, according to the country we live in, but we can spend up to 90% of our time in them, within these buildings. So the use of renewable materials really has two large objectives. The first one has to do with reducing the environmental impact of buildings, and the second would be to improve the health conditions within them. Use of resources. I think that this example is very illustrative. If we ask ourselves how many planets will we need so all people in the world could benefit from the same life conditions that we have in the European Union, how many planets do you think? 1, 2, 3, 4, 3.5. So it is clear that in the countries in the north, in order to continue to have the way of life, the living that we have to reduce, and we have to help people live better with less energy so that all the population in all of the other countries of the world in the global south can access a dignified life. So let's look at the resources, the inputs of energy that we have in the life cycle of a building. We have the manufacturing of materials, then we have the transportation of those materials to the construction site, then we have the process of construction, and then we have the use phase or the functioning of the building, and finally demolition, although we should simply talk about rehabilitation, not demolishing, but because we also lose all this energy in demolition, that the energy that has been placed into them. So all these phases, the first three phases, have to do with embedded energy. And then we have operational energy or operative energy that we use during the life cycle of the building. Passivhaus is an energy and comfort standard, which is excellent in the reduction of operative energy. When it comes together with renewable materials, with a low environmental impact, we also impact all this embedded energy. What proportion does the consumption of energy in the use phase or in the manufacturing phase? This depends on the country, but here we have a study from the UK where for offices, we see that according to this data, about 35% of CO2 emissions come from embedded or initial energy. In industrial buildings, it's 47%, and in homes or residential buildings, it's about 51%. So this has a really important weight. If we add that as time goes by and we can improve energy efficiency in buildings and using Passivhaus concepts or other strategies of high energy efficiency, the proportional weight of embedded energy increases because we are reducing the energy that is used in the life of the building. So embedded energy is even more important. In this context, a European project was launched, which among others had the objective of developing new thermal materials from a biological origin with 50% less of incorporated energy, 20% increase in thermal, and at a cost of 50% lower cost. And I mention it because there are some interesting examples that we can see here. A structural panel, insulating structural panel for new buildings using renewable materials like wood that has many advantages in relation to concrete and steel. Also clay and other materials that are maybe not renewable, but yes, reusable. So this panel was installed in 2 buildings in the UK and also in Seville, Spain, and with sensors on the inside and on the outside with hydrothermal simulation. Here we see data from the temperature, relative temperature and humidity, and here we can see the simulation data. I mention this because it's important that the correlation that we see here is basically excellent. What does this mean? We can use renewable materials and predict their hydrothermal behavior in buildings so as to use them in a safe way and create really low energy consumption buildings, long-lasting and comfortable. Here, the same thing. We measured the amount of heat that leaves through this panel. And what we simulated was this line here in red. Here we have, again, an excellent correlation. That is to say, renewable materials are reliable. And one of the results of this project was a guide for the passive house construction with renewable materials, showing a series of construction details with few thermal bridges for the construction of buildings. I want to show some examples of constructions with passive house standards. This is a home in Ibiza, in the Mediterranean. It's a home for one family, and this, according to premium passive house criteria. This is the highest level of passive house certification. It includes measures of energy efficiency that are still higher than classic passive house and the generation of in situ renewable energy. These are the values and a summary of the information of the skin of the building. We have here some photos of the construction. This home was done with a structure of wood. We used an OCV as an air barrier, and there's ventilated roof and it's white in order to reflect the heat in the summer. And here we have the thermal insulation through wood fiber and high density wood fiber plates. Here are some of the images of the inside. And here we have like the gallery as a solar protection element. And here we have some images of the final result.
Some monitoring data. This is the CO2 concentration of the interior air in the main room during a week in November, below 1,000 parts per million. And the PET platform indicates a good air quality. And the whole week has been below 1,000. We could also monitor the house, calibrate the tool for HPP, and compare it with the measured values, except deviations between the calculated values measured month after month, and the percentage of dispersion. That is to say that what we have to design passive house buildings is quite reliable. Another house, it was the first certified passive house, if I'm not mistaken, with straw insulation in Spain. It was made with a system, a pre-manufactured system of wood. Here are the values and the results of the PHPP. This was made with different modules manufactured with light wood and straw in different formats, and we can see the origin of the straw in the coast of Catalonia. This is in the workshop. Also OCV wood for the interior with permeable particles, together with a wind barrier. And the assembly of the house took 2 days to be assembled and to be impermeable, and the total construction was between 4 and 5 months. Some images of the finished house. It is some 900 meters above sea level, 60 kilometers in the interior of the Barcelona coast. Here we have monitoring data of the behavior in the heat wave of 2015. And we can see the openings in the structure and the first floor. So with the exception of certain moments in which the users were outside, the temperature remains without air conditioning, normally below 26 degrees, indicating comfort, quite good comfort. In this slide, we can contrast the temperature and humidity data, horizontal and vertical relative humidity, and the dots, the blue dots are the times with occupation. The red ones are no occupation times. So normally the temperatures and the humidity are between 22 and 26 degrees and between 70 and 30% relative humidity. So it's a good level of comfort. Consumption can be seen in this graph. Well, you can see the kilowatts for all the consumption. You can see it on the chart: heating, ventilation, electric devices, etc. And this is in euro. This in euro means 650 euro a year. So this house is really very comfortable with very low consumption. Another house in wood also, with the results of the PHPP. This house was insulated with cellulose, insufflated cellulose. And you can see the perforations here in the photograph. This is the way it was insufflated, with newspaper paper crushed and with a treatment, anti-flame treatment. And it was recycled. This house was assembled very quickly. The windows have triple glazing and has given a good result in hermetic tests. It has double flow ventilation and 8 radiators of low temperature on the floor for heating and cooling. They are fed from a heat pump for water. Here we can see the finished house, and here monitoring data. August 2019 showing temperature, the red line, and humidity, the blue line. So normally the temperature is very agreeable, 22, 23, 26 degrees, and humidity below 60%. That's also seen in this graph. So what is interesting is to analyze the data of the monitoring so as to prove that Passivhaus do work, and if they are used with renewable material, they also work. Another example is not certified, but these are Passivhauses in England, in Bristol, and behind the brick, massive brick, the houses are built with these pre-manufactured panels in wood and straw isolation. And the results of energy is 90 euro a month, some 1,100 euro a year for heating and hot water. And just to finish, some houses, cooperative houses, 5 blocks of apartments, non-certified passive houses, but designed and built following the standards. And they were also made with the same panels, with straw isolation and wood structure. And some of the owners says that in his 4-room apartment, he has an annual invoice of 400 euro and electricity 400 euro. So it's some 50% less of a normal house in this city of Leeds in Great Britain. So as a conclusion, passive house with renewable energy, of course, yes. And passive house with renewable material also. So thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Oliver.
Thank you, Oliver.
Certificador Passivhaus y
Oliver is a passive house certifier. I'm sorry I did not mention your bio at the beginning. As you see, he's a specialist in the subject and physics of the buildings and spaces and renewable materials.
Gracias, Oliver.
Thank you very much, Oliver. And now we go on. So we're going to listen to Mathis Wackernagel. He is the president of the network, and he. I give the word to Mathis. I give the floor to Mathis. Here I am. Thank you, Jose. Welcome. Thank you for having me here in this forum. I'm Mathis Wackernagel from Global Footprint Network. I am in California. I am from California, but originally from Switzerland. Thank you, Oliver, for your interesting presentation. He was presenting something from my presentation because he was saying how many planets we need to keep the Europeans. He said 3.5, and that is the figures that we are using. We are comparing how many planets we have. It's easy, and how much we are using, and that is the calculation of the ecological footprint. So why is ecological construction so important? Now we are building cities all over the world as if there were no resources problems. We are building here and there. How come? But 200 years ago, when they were living in Manhattan, and it was called New Amsterdam, not New York at that time, they were considering how many people could live in Manhattan. And they realized that if they did things properly, 1 million people could live there. They didn't think of Central Park, but 1 million people could live there. And they said, how are we going to use the resources, and how are we going to bring the food to the people? And in 1780, they said, well, we have to produce the Erie Canal, which joins Chicago and the Great Lands to produce food with New York. So they already thought, how can we produce for the cities? Because today we're producing the cities as if we were producing something else, but we have no gasoline or no gas. How are we going to have cars? So the initial idea was to say, how big should the capsule be over the city to keep the city so that the city can be self-sufficient for production? And that is the ecologic print of the city. Because in the end, after all, each country is like a big farm with a forest, with grass and everything. So I show you these countries. I'm going to share the screen. This is the world. We see the world. We see the farms. One could be the United States or Spain. And how much is used and how much is consumed. That is the footprints. The green line shows how much there is per person in the world. In the ecological, from the ecological point of view, and how much we're using is the red line. And it's admitting that the regeneration of nature in the end is the limiting factor that we have. And how can we fit into the planet? Today, we are using like 70% more than what the Earth can generate in terms of hectares, global hectares, 2.8 per person. We're using 1.6. And in the end, we won't want to use everything for the humans because there are wild species that need space. And that's why we also need space. So the situation is this. We can see equator, for instance. In Ecuador, there were 5 times more Ecuador in 1960 than was used per person. The people started consuming more, but since there are more Equatorians, there is less equator per person, and now they are almost reaching an ecological deficit. So the people in Ecuador, they said, you go against the right to development. We said, no, we want development, but this is the right to collapse. It's bad for the countries that have no income. You won't have the money to buy the resources you need from another country. So to understand the ecological balance is key. To understand why it is important to have an infrastructure, an efficient infrastructure. For instance, if we calculate for Switzerland, where I come from, today 16% of the ecologic footprint is for the buildings, to build them and to keep them. Today, the most modern buildings have 2 or 3 times more energy in the construction than in the operation. So that's why construction materials are key. These 16% of the ecologic footprint, since the ecology is much bigger than in the world, if we all live like the Swiss, we should be needing like 3 planets and a half to live like the Swiss, because this belongs to 45% of the capacity of the terrain of the planet. That is to say that the use of buildings in Switzerland is so much that almost half of the capacity, ecological capacity in the world per person. And also to keep, so as not to have a climate change, we shouldn't be using more than half of the planet. So the buildings themselves use so much of what exists in the world for the buildings. So we need a revolution to produce and to maintain and to use the buildings. We know very well what the future is like. The people will want to sleep and eat, move, have buildings, but we need buildings that are effective. Otherwise, we won't be able to have a very agreeable life. Still more important is that there is a delay, a big distance between the construction and the use of the houses. You build a house today, it will be for 50 or 100 years. It will last for 50 or 100 years. So we are building the future today. And in that future, we already know that we'll have more climate change, more scarcity of resources. So it's more important to produce buildings that can be useful for the future that we are foreseeing. Last thing, how to think of the economy of the buildings, because people say, oh, this is too expensive to invest on effective houses, etc. But it's the other way about. It's much cheaper in the long run, in the long term. If we see a city, for instance, like Cape Town in South Africa, just because of water, they didn't pay much for the water. And the water was almost finished. If they have no water, the whole city values nothing. The same, the houses. If we have houses that do not work because we have no resources to keep them, they value nothing. So from an economic standpoint, the most effective thing, the buildings have to be within the ecologic limits. The most valuable will be in the future. So the economic point of view is quite clear, no doubt about it. And with this, I finish my presentation and I say, yes, we are biological. We live from regeneration of ecosystems that we have, that we use, how much we have, how much we use. And then we see that the budget is limited. And what we need is that revolution of Passivhaus. And I would be very glad to be with you to produce that necessary revolution. Thank you. Thank you, Mathis. Very important things. To use sustainable material and try to use the resources we have in our countries in a more responsible way. And with that, we can introduce two ecologically involved professionals like Felix Queupul, a member of the Mapuche Nation and a director of the Business Center of Santiago de Chile and creator of Circular Economy and Engineering. Marcelo Bachuni will welcome Felix and say some words. Hello, Marcelo. How are you? Apparently, they are greeting themselves. So that means, hello, my friend. It's a greeting in the Mapuche Nation. It is an honor for me to have you here in this conference. And we share the vision of the village of Passivhaus. And we also have to have the respect of the resources and our environment.
Just like our ancestors used to have before the arrival of the Spaniards. But now we are in the 21st century. And what do we do today? What is the vision that you have? And in other conferences, we will also learn about the visions of our other colleagues from members of indigenous peoples and indigenous nations. Welcome. Saludos a todos, para todos los pueblos indígenas del mundo. La Yala, de Patagonia, Chile, un cariño para todos. Thank you very much for the invitation to be in this space, in this international space, where I can tell you about the year where we are opening up to the international community to propose and denounce the situation of the indigenous communities in this common house that is unbalanced, that is sick. And certain international organizations such as the UN and COP24, COP25 have highlighted that indigenous population makes up of the 5% of the world's population and has been the protector of the 80% of the biodiversity of the planet. I thank you, mainly because we are amidst a pandemic of COVID-19, which have affected our population, has affected our population so much. The Mapuche understand that when the earth is imbalanced, spirit is imbalanced, and we get sick. Yesterday was the International Mother's Day, and for us, Mother Earth is our mother. Sometimes our brothers spit on her, and that concerns us. Distinguished humanity, distinguished brothers and sisters, friends of the earth, at this moment, the construction models are a very important part and affect the health of this Mother Earth. Cement, chemical products that bring many harm to the earth. We see that the pyramids don't fall, Machu Picchu constructions don't fall, but other constructions do fall. These indigenous communities are the ones that have seen themselves devastated because they have been taken away from their natural environments. In that sense, by modern construction. So it is modern man has given way to a soul model, mental model, and they have started pollution in the last 250 years through plastic and the development of chemical products. And that's what they call development, and that's what they link to their lifestyle. Why does modern man look at himself today and say, and he says that with Galileo Galilei and Christopher Columbus, everything started. And I say, no, it's not like that. This thought, this thinking in its evolutionary line, in the social basis of humanity, but we are animals. We are part of the earth. We are animals that live with the earth, that live with the sun. Without water, without light, without sunlight, we could not live. We are animals, but in constant evolution. So this is why we claim ancient knowledge and all its cultural heritage in every part of the planet where there is a native population. They know about their local areas. For all of this, brothers and sisters, we think that if we, the indigenous peoples, would just go along with the development, what is development for indigenous peoples? Do we want buildings that are 200 meters high? Do we want to break with a natural, to break up the natural water streams or water currents? No, that's not the world or the economy that we want. So we have to change two concepts from the point of view of the indigenous. We have to change the idea of economy. These are words that have led to this natural rupture. Selfishness of certain people have taken their business and they have imposed certain economies on countries and on certain populations. So we want new proposals. In relation to climate change, in this climate week, we suggest an international institute where we can train indigenous people that can monitor and control the models that the United Nations is presenting as clean development, a mechanism that is solidary and where auditors from very far parts of the world don't have to travel. We can have them locally, and so we can incentivize the reductions models here for the big companies. These models, in order to be able to carry out the Paris Agreement, we need local development and we need collective development. We agree with Passivhaus's work and we are on board with it. And we believe that the generations, we need to find new ways, new forms of economic development linked to this other development that we're talking about. We are looking for a conceptual framework for economic development, but we have the basis, the foundation of these vegetable fibers that can be used in the Lake Titicaca or the south of Chile or in other areas where there is ancestral knowledge, not local units where we generate geothermally, photovoltaic, where we generate solar and wind-powered energy. My brothers and sisters, we have passive elements. These are not elements that break with everything. That's why we come here today, to tell you in a collective agreement, we highlight that the earth is our home, our only home, our natural habitat. The nature is the most important thing that we have. And men and women are a natural being that cohabitate with others on Earth. The balance of nature is what is most important. People, their health, their culture, life is what is most important in the natural environment. Knowledge, ancient knowledge and modern knowledge have to merge. They have to be supplementary. The modern knowledge cannot annul ancient knowledge from our populations all over the world. Spirituality of humanity is its essence, and it has to do with its territory and its culture, and this must not be imposed. Work is a collective act, collaborative act that should help both parts, the workers and the employers. Technology is a tool for the use of humanity and not a tool of oppression. Political power of the states should be given back to the peoples, and should be free from selfish principles. Nature is the most important thing in life. Economy should be used with solidary objectives. Climate change is a main problem that we should solve between all of us, so with solidarity. And this is a call, this is an appeal to everybody on this platform and also from the indigenous world. We need to form a new world order. Our north has to change to our ancestral west, so we can restart with these new processes of living together as human beings among different countries. So from here, I don't want to take up more of your time. I just want to talk about the passive elements of this economy. We have them in the indigenous communities, and a prosperous collective and communitary prosperity will take place. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give this presentation. Felix, thank you very much. We're very happy to hear you. It's been a pleasure. Mathis, we are all there on the same frequency. Felix did like a communion of all of this. I think the summary, Felix, is that we thought that we lived, or they pushed us to have illimited growth, of unlimited growth with finite resources. When something grows, with illimited growth, we call it cancer, and it destroys the organ or the individual. And this is what nature is teaching us. So to start with, what I want are some words to close here, some words from each one of you to close, but mostly a commitment to tell you that the Latin American Institute's doors are open. We can put this on the table of the discussion. Felix, as South American Forum and as Vice President of the World and Business Indigenous Forum, you commit that all this knowledge, indigenous and ancestral knowledge, can be put on the table. I'm very, very thank you, and I am very, very grateful, and I want to hear your final words. I just want to say thank you. On the next 17th and 18th of November, we want to sit down and think about a new model of collective development. There is an indigenous voice, and it is sustainable. The word economy and business have a meaning from the indigenous point of view. This philosophy that leads us to get together, to meet with new generations. Mathis was saying it before, Oliver also, how many planets do we need if we devour it completely? So it's time, and the Climate Week is saying it, is telling us this. This indigenous population that has been unattended because the superior value of the indigenous population has been its ability to adapt and to have resilience processes. This is the highest, whether they speak Spanish or English, whether they dress as indigenous or not, but their minds are indigenous. So we want the world to go back to its origin in thought. And it's not that the past is going to take us to the future. No, it's the past that will take us to the future, that will lead us to the future. Thank you very much, Juan Manuel. Oliver and Mathis.
Por favor. ¿Quién va? Tú vas, Oliver.
No te escuchamos, Oliver.
Oye,
Ahí
sí.
sí.
Vale, de
Okay.
acuerdo.
Now we can hear.
Mathis, gracias, y Felix también, gracias por
Thank you,
estas
Mathis, and thank you, Felix, for your presentations. They've been super interesting, giving different viewpoints of this puzzle about materials and Passivhaus and how we can put all this together. I think it's very interesting. Just a reflection that I would like to add is that one of the things that I believe are fundamental and positive about Passivhaus is the way that they encourage new knowledge. They encourage new solutions, new products, new technologies for the well-being of people. They encourage the creation of small companies, medium companies, and local companies, local businesses. And they encourage circular economy. And I believe that this in the Latin American context is very, very interesting because, as Juan Manuel said at the beginning, it's a continent with a huge abundance of resources. And we don't have to go to other countries to find solutions for the needs of the population in Latin America. So I believe that the renewable materials in that sense have a lot to do there. And I was lucky to be born in Mexico. I have Latin America in my heart. And it's very nice for me to be here. It's very emotional for me to be here. And I hope that we can continue to work together and share information and knowledge that I believe is something that is very, very positive of the family and the community that is Passivhaus. And I feel that COVID taught us that we are biology, that we are one biology. The virus unites us. We are part of the earth. And it's not that we belong, that the earth belongs to us, but that we belong to the earth. We are part of the earth. That's why economy is not against ecology. It's a subsystem that is part of ecology. And this is why we have to join economy and ecology. And that's the only thing that makes sense. Everything else is destructive. We have to produce a regenerative economy, and we are living now in an economy that is living off destruction. That's not going to work for anybody. What is nice is what we see here, that the ability that humans have to think about the future, and through that, to learn about the past, to learn from the past. And that's innovative. It's impressive to see what is possible. The example, Oliver's examples are fabulous. And the Passivhaus movement that shows what is possible. That gives a lot of hope. So yes, it's nice to be part of the earth. It's nice to be part of a biology. And in the end, regeneration allows us to not go bankrupt. We have to live with nature, within a budget, with nature. And that way we won't go bankrupt. Okay, thank you very much to all of you. I feel that we are all on the same frequency. and we will contact you again to continue moving forward. Thank you immensely. And now we are going to go to the next panel, which is very interesting because it's where we're going to make some announcements and we're going to show you some alliances. So now we are all committed to create common alliances. Yes, thank you very much, all of you. Let's continue in the next block then. Mathis, Oliver, Felix, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.